This is Kevin Pruitt with Rising Tide Startups, and my guest today is Mark Podolsky. Mark, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Kevin Pruitt, thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you being here. Can you share a little bit about your background and family, work, history, experience, just all the good bits with our listeners?
Yeah. I can kind of give you my origin story if you want. I used to be
Absolutely.
a very miserable, micromanaged, 45-minute commute to work and back investment banker, specializing in mergers and acquisitions with private equity groups. And Kevin, it got so bad for me that I wouldn't get the Sunday blues anticipating Monday rolling around. I'd get the Friday blues anticipating the
Oh,
weekend going by
wow.
really fast.
Those are worse
And
than that. That's like two times
yeah,
worse than the Monday blues with a
it,
kicker.
it was it was terrible. So my firm hires this guy. He's telling me that as a side hustle, he's buying up raw land, pennies on the dollar. He's flipping them online, and he's making a 300% return on his investment. Well, I'm looking at companies all day long, and a great company has 15% EBITDA margins or free cash flow. Average company is 10%. I'm looking at companies all day long, less than 10%. So of course I don't believe him. So we go to New Mexico. I got $3,000 saved up for car repairs. I do exactly what he says to do. I buy up 10 half-acre parcels, an average price of $300 each. I flip them online. They all sell for an average price of $1,200 each, 300%. It worked. So I took all that money. I went to another auction in Arizona where I live. And again, this is 2000. There's no one in the room. I'm buying up land. I'm buying up, lots, acreage, no competition. And over the next 6 months, I sold all that land and I made over $90,000 cash. So I
Wow.
go to my wife. I go, honey, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to become a full-time land investor. And she's pregnant at the time. She's like, absolutely not. So I said, okay. So I worked land investing
Okay, so plan B.
for, yeah. It took about 18 months for the land investing income to exceed the investment banking income. And then I quit. I've been doing it full time ever since 2001. I've done over 5,200 land deals, and I absolutely love it because I can walk you through the model, but I think I have the best passive income model.
We've talked to a lot of people that have active and passive income, and I think this is one of the most unique stories that we've had on Rising Tide, and so touch a little bit, kind of round out the comprehensive intro. Tell us a little bit about family, where you live, what your background is.
Yeah. So I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. I've been married. I'm on my 23rd year.
Congratulations.
Knock on wood. Yeah. Um,
Knock
let's
on virtual
keep it here.
background.
Yeah, knock on virtual background. Keep your fingers crossed. I've got 3 kids. My son is 19. My oldest is 19. My middle is 16. My youngest is 14. So I have 3 teenagers, and my entire goal in life is for them to not give me an eye roll. Very difficult to do.
I'm just thinking how
But
impressed I am
yeah.
at your wife with all that testosterone around.
Oh yeah. No, she's a trooper for sure.
Well, I love kind of the backstory and just kind of letting our listeners kind of get a real comprehensive, rounded view. And take us back to the time, you said you had the Friday blues. And so the guy comes in and he says, hey, I'm making this income by buying just raw land and flipping it and making a 300% return or whatever. So I have to believe your initial response was probably skeptical.
It definitely was. I was very skeptical. And my biggest fear was, and I talked to my wife about this, because I was risking capital that I shouldn't risk because it was saved up for car repairs. I said, well, let's walk through the worst case scenario here. The worst case scenario is we own raw land. So that's not so bad. Like, you're not gonna get mad at me walking into the garage and be like, oh, Mark, get rid of this raw land. So it's not going to bother her. And then the other part was that I thought, well, if I can't sell it, like he's saying that we can, I could barter it, and maybe I could get free haircuts for a year, free dentistry. I could barter it. There's something I could do with it. There was nothing to maintain, nothing to protect. It wasn't going to take any of my time. So after going through that initial sort of reverse engineering of, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? It wasn't that bad.
So I know you're probably going to touch on this when you talk about the model itself and the due diligence process, but to me, the worst case scenario is not that you just have raw land. To me, the worst case scenario is you have raw land that is 3 Mile Island, or you have raw land that is, has some kind of hazardous materials on it that you are now responsible for taking care of. So, uh, have you ever? I mean, did that even enter your mind, or is that even a true risk? Do you bear that risk as the landowner?
It is a true risk, but not in the Southwest. But if you're going to buy like Jersey or Pennsylvania, that
Michigan,
is, Michigan, any sort of industrial area, yeah, that is a real risk. But this is rural land in New Mexico, and all the states that I work in are more rural, Southwest California, Florida, a little bit Northwest Oregon, Washington type states. Because Kevin, let's face it, nobody wakes up and thinks to themselves, "Boy, I live by some raw land today in Iowa," unless you live
unless
in
you're a farmer.
Iowa.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. So I want to get the
Exactly.
biggest buyer pool possible. And then, of course, before, while we have a checklist for due diligence, and we always check EPA.gov just to make sure we're not even close to a Superfund site.
Right. Well, I think I was listening to you on another podcast interview, and you talked about like buying in the sun states or the sun belt or whatever. So what's the advantage to that over, say, Alaska, or say Washington or Maine, or is it just the fact that people are more risk averse or less risk averse in those areas, or do you have like you said, do you have a larger buyer pool? What's the difference?
Yeah, we have a massive buyer pool. Imagine that you're in New York suffering right now in the winter, and you see an ad for 40 acres in sunny Nevada. And you think to yourself, well, boy, that'd be a nice place to go. That's really, and it's like, okay, I click on it. It's like, oh my gosh, this is irresistible. It's $24,000. I can't, that's, I can't get even less than a postage stamp in anywhere in New York City for less than, you know, $1 million. So I think those two factors alone are what allow us to sell these properties so quickly.
So like I said, I was listening to another podcast that you had done earlier, and I tried to kind of marry these two completely disparate thoughts as I was listening to that, and you were talking about people wanting to buy like unimproved land or just raw land for various purposes, but I one of my kind of pet interests is the tiny house movement.
Hmm.
And so people are always talking about how difficult it is to find land for, to put a tiny house on. And not just that is because they actually not just want to live in a tiny house, they want to live in a tiny house kind of off grid. So I mean, have you seen any interest or any increased interest in land for that specific niche?
We have a number of my clients, that's their specific niche for sure. And we know how to find those properties 25, 30 cents on the dollar,
Wow.
and then, allow them to provide those savings. Now, what we don't do is get into the game of helping them develop those
Right,
houses.
right. Yeah, and that's I mean, I love that there was another story that you kind of told about, a guy buying a piece of property and almost pre-selling it, at the same so
Hmm.
had like a double closing. So you had the purchase and the sale at the same time at closing. So he's made a return on his investment and virtually not even touched the property. Not even probably never been to it. Had a 15, a 2 hour ownership window that he actually owned the property, outright. So how often does that happen?
As much as we can get it to happen in our marketing. So we want to pre-sell during due diligence. And we do have a built-in best buyer to pre-sell to. Do you remember who it is?
Well, you mentioned maybe the neighbors.
The neighbors. You're right. It's the
I
neighbors.
10 bonus points for the host or something.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely.
So
So
what keeps
oftentimes
them
the
from
neighbors will
buying it
buy it.
though? So if you're talking to the neighbor and you're saying, you're just telling them, I just bought the land beside you, or I am buying the land beside you,
No,
and
I just bought the land beside me. Here's
okay,
your opportunity.
Okay, because the
Yeah.
the offer has already been submitted, or is it submitted with a contingency based on due diligence, or how's the I'm
Yeah,
kind of jumping
it's
ahead. I don't want to get if you want to do the full process model and answer these questions at one time, you can, but there's so many questions that pop up.
yeah, no worries. I mean, just to answer the question, it's basically if it's an area that we know really well and we're really confident that this is going to close,
Hmm.
then we'll send out the neighbor letters. If we're not, we'll wait on the neighbor letters. Either way, the neighbor letters are going out when we're really 90% certain we're closing, because there is a lag time in getting that mail out. And by the time we get the response, we will own the property.
Right.
And we'll
Right.
use a website called simplifile.com to record it. It's super fast. I mean, you can just do it online.
So are you normally buying properties that are like have tax liens on them? Are they tax auctions, or are they just outright auctions, or is it's are we people liquidating family land as part of a settlement after a death? I mean, what's the typical, I guess, source of the land that you're buying?
Well, I really want to get those properties before they go to auction because I don't want to compete with other land investors. So what I'll do is I'll look at the get the list of the people that own the real property from the county assessor. Then I'll scrub that list and let's say the use code is VL for vacant land. Now I just
Mhm.
have the vacant land. Then I'll scrub it one more time by APN, assessor's parcel number. Now I have it by subdivision and acreage. Because what I want to do is basically I want to send out an actual offer on the property. I don't want to be in the negotiating business. I don't
Right.
want to be in the appraisal business. I'm like, look, I can always make more money. I can't get more time. So anything that's going to save me time, I want to do. So what I'll do is I'll look at the last 12 to 18 months comparable sales on those parcels and simply divide by 4. And that's going to get me what Warren Buffett would call a 300% margin of safety. So then we send out our offers. Now, this is all automated using our software, LG Pass, the Land Geek proprietary automated software system.
Hmm.
So those offers go out, and we are anticipating a 3 to 5% response rate. If it's under 3%, we know our offer was too low. If it's over 5%, we're getting nervous. Like maybe the offer was a little too high and we need to retrade. So we want to be in that response rate area. Then what we'll do is once they accept it, we'll go through due diligence and confirm they own the property, check, make sure there's no back taxes, or if there are back taxes, that they're not going to kill the entire deal. Look to make sure there's no breaks in the chain of title, just a whole checklist. And then everything checks out. That, by the way, is outsourced to our team in the Philippines. We pay about $11 for it, and that's for deals that are 5,000 or less. 5,000 or more, we'll still do that, but we're going to close through a title company. It's
Hmm.
way safer.
Sure.
So then we own the property. We want to sell it 30 days or less. So we'll send out our neighbor letters. We'll go to our buyers list. We'll go to Craigslist. We'll go to Facebook Marketplace, buy sell groups, and then we'll go to the lands, landmodo.com, landsofamerica.com, landandfarm.com. These are platforms. But what we want to do is, let's say that our initial investment was $2,500. We want to get our capital out on the down payment. So we'll ask for a $2,500 down payment, and then we'll make it a car payment. Let's say $339 a month, 9% interest over the next 84 months. So it's a one-time sale. I get my capital out on the down, or maybe within 6 months. And now I've got a passive income stream of $339 a month and 9% interest over 84 months, coming every single month on an automated basis using a software called geekpay.io that I also developed. And then I've got this passive income stream, no renters, no rehabs, no renovations, no rodents. Because I'm not dealing with a tenant, I'm exempt from Dodd-Frank, RESPA, or the SAFE Act, any of this onerous real estate legislation. So the game that we play is, can we create enough of these land notes where our passive income exceeds our fixed expenses? And now we're working because we want to, not because we have to.
I mean, I love the idea of kind of carrying the note, so to speak, the owner financing, because um, I mean, how many of your properties would you say are financed versus purchased outright?
I mean, I only market because I only want the paper. When I first started, the biggest mistake I made was flipping for cash because now I had a new problem. I had to redeploy the cash, pay
Right.
the taxes, redeploy the cash. So now I create all these notes. I'd say 95% of all the properties I sell are notes. The other 5% are because they insist on paying off the note or they
Right.
insist on paying cash. But I won't market it for the cash. I want the note. I want that passive income stream and just keep growing it and growing it. Now, if they default, great. I keep their down payment. I keep their monthly payments, and there's no cost of foreclosure because I'm using a land contract, which means the asset stays in my name until they pay off their note. I get a new down payment. I get a new note payer, and using GeekPay.io, the way that it's set up is if the ACH does fail, we have a credit card on file. So our default rate went from 8% to 4% using the software.
So, what would you say would be the average like price? Oh, I don't want to get maybe that granular, but are the majority of parcels, are they, I mean, I guess I had in mind that these were probably a low end parcels of land, we're talking 3 to 5,000 average or something like that. But I mean, it sounds like to me that it could be, substantially higher than that.
It'd be substantially higher. It could be substantially lower. We've picked up parcels for $250. We've picked up parcels for $50,000.
Mm-hmm.
I did $1 million deal. It just depends. But either way, it doesn't matter. If I'm buying at 25, 30 cents on the dollar amount is irrelevant because if you get any asset, 25, 30 cents a dollar, raw land, a car, anything, there's someone else on the other end of that deal.
Right. Right. So, and the worst case scenario in a default is you just get the land back.
Yep, that's the worst case. And you just
So
resell it.
how many, if these are there any contingencies or stipulations on the land itself about the fact that they can or cannot improve the land or change the land, during I guess the time that the note's being carried?
Yeah, I mean, our contracts really stipulate what they can do, what they can't do. Now, obviously, they can't dump, they can't break the law, they can't build a house because I own it. So, if they want to, well, first of all, they won't get a building permit because they have to have it in their name
Yeah.
to get a building permit. But let's say, for example, that they fence the property or they drop a septic or they put a shed there. If they don't pay their note, and this has happened, I keep all the improvements. So personally, improve it all you want. You're most likely not going to default if you keep investing more money into your raw land. But there are cases where that could happen, and then I keep all the improvements and resell it with a shed, a fence.
Right. And I mean, once it's attached to the land, it becomes real property anyway. It's not like if it goes into default, they can come in and remove that, right? I mean, it's part of the land
Nope,
itself.
it's part of the land itself.
But majority of these parcels or plots, I guess you've probably never seen in person. I would think maybe on
No,
Google Earth,
again,
or do you have people in local areas that are actually going out and scouting land for you and that type of thing as well?
absolutely. If this is a new area, we'll do a local Craigslist gig for $50. Have somebody go out, fill out our property report and our checklist.
Hmm.
I want to know what the neighbors are doing. Are they dumping? I want to know what the road is like. I want to know how difficult it was to find the property using the GPS coordinates. I want to know what's compelling about the property. Are there mountain views? Are there lakes? Are there streams? How far from the nearest Walmart, McDonald's? All this I really want to know
Oh, that's great
before
info.
I
Yeah.
purchase that property. And then I get it. They'll shoot photos, they'll shoot video, and we'll use a little app called What Three Words because I put it on their smartphone. And then I know if they're pretty close to the property or not because they have to
Hmm.
send me the GPS coordinates just to verify that they're they're there.
Right.
So
They're not sitting at McDonald's in
that
Scottsdale going,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, land looks
yeah,
great from here.
yeah, exactly. So we know they actually went out there, and that works really well because again, what's the best use of my time? It's not going out looking at raw land because once you've looked at it, you see, oh, this is pretty much all looks the same out there.
Yeah. I can imagine you get a picture of Google Earth, screenshot it off Google Earth, and then you're going, I don't think you went out there because this is actually a drone shot, or a
Yeah,
satellite shot.
exactly.
You couldn't have taken this unless you climbed a tree. So yeah,
Right.
this is not it. Tell
Yeah.
us, I mean, it sounds like to me that since 2001, it's just been all unicorns and rainbows, in your business. So, but is there a kind of a horror story, or is there one that you're just going, wow, we missed on that one. We didn't do our due diligence. You know, we would sure like to have that one back.
Well, I'll tell you, I
Take
mean,
a
as far
mulligan.
as like deals are concerned, the worst deal I ever did was in a property owners association in Western Pennsylvania. And I mean, I fell in love with this. It was a overdeveloped subdivision. So there was 1,000 lots, but there's 300 homes out there. They had $1 million homes out there. They had, I mean, it was beautiful. It was 2 PGA rated golf courses, 3 beautiful lakes. They had a clubhouse and a restaurant, post office, a full community. It was gated. The wealthy people lived over in this community. So obviously it was overdeveloped. All these lots were sold, but nobody was paying their POA assessments. So I fly in there, get in my suit. I go to the county and say, "You got dead money. People aren't paying their taxes." And I go to the association and say, "You got dead money. No one's paying their POA fees. I'm gonna resurrect all of it. And all you got to do is deed me the property. Now, once I own it, during that time, I'm not paying taxes and I'm not paying POA fees. But once I sell it, I'll collect it for you." So they said, "Great." Guess how long it took them to say great?
Probably as long as it took you to tell the story, or maybe
Three
shorter.
years. 3 years,
Oh, wow. Okay.
because they had the golf people were afraid.
Yeah.
Their clique. Then you had the the people that are afraid, like, the lunching ladies. All these new people. Mark's gonna sell all this property. All these people are gonna come to our community, and what are we gonna do? The lake's gonna be overfilled. The boaters hated me. Everybody hated me. So I said, "Look, it's gonna be okay. Don't worry." So, but now it's I buy it in 2007, and I sell those lots. I make about $100,000 profit. But 2008 rolls around,
Mm.
and man, I couldn't sell them. And it was the first time in business that when I factored in my time, I really broke even on that deal. That was just horrible. So even though I made money, I always look at the value of my time. I really broke even on that deal because, I mean, it's crazy to say, but in my niche, when you buy the asset 30 cents on the dollar, you're not. I've never been stuck with a piece of raw land, and I've always made money on it. Just being disciplined.
So have you ever purchased one that just absolutely will not sell? I mean, you couldn't give this land away. You paid $3,000 for a parcel, and nobody cares. Nobody wants to move to Southwest Arkansas. I mean,
No, that's never happened. What did happen was I screwed up on due diligence. So I bought in another property owners association, and or I just didn't see. I forgot how I screwed it up, but they owed like $3,000 in POA fees, and I think I paid like $100 for the lot, and I was gonna sell these things for $1,000. Well, I'm like, this is not. No one's gonna buy these with this lien on it of $3,000. So I, scratched my head and I thought, well, how do you figure this one out? Like, I know what I'll do. How does a lien get cleared? You don't pay your taxes and it goes to auction. So I didn't pay the taxes. I let it go to auction, and then at the auction it went for like I forget how much it went for, but like I want to say like $8,000. Had the local attorney apply for the overage. So if the back taxes were 1,000 and it sells for 8,000, I get the overage of 7,000. So I made like $7,000 on that deal.
so, but did that not hurt your credit rating to let something go, for delinquent taxes? Is that attached to
Yeah,
your
this
credit
is
rating, or?
doesn't affect your credit rating at all. Not paying your property taxes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, because it's not, doesn't get, no one, government agencies don't care about that stuff.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So, There's one other story that I'd love to hear you kind of expound on a little bit, and I think that if I remember correctly, you were talking about it was another due diligence, or maybe you said I wish I would have done more, due diligence before I purchased the land, but actually I'll let you tell the story. But there was something about land being, I thought I bought 25 acres, but I bought 5 acres, horizontal and
Oh,
20
my
acres
40,
vertical.
yeah. I bought so I thought I bought 40 acres in New Mexico. What I bought was 15 acres and 25 of them were on the side of a mountain. And this is like, oh my gosh, I paid $2,500 and I thought, well, how am I going to market this? People are going to see the aerial maps and see, oh, and satellite maps, it's on the side of a mountain. You can't really access it. So I thought, oh, I'll just throw this up on eBay. Well, the first day got bid up to $2,500. By the 10th day, it was up to $32,500. And I'm freaking out, thinking
Wow.
maybe I misrepresented the property somehow, even though I'm seeing the pictures and the maps, like maybe they're not seeing it. So the person wins the auction. I immediately call them up. I'm like, hey, just to be clear, you see like 25 of these acres are on the side of a mountain. He's like, it's perfect. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I'm a film director in LA and I've been wanting to film out there and I don't want to deal with permits. So now I own the land. So after that, I decided there literally is a pig for every barn.
Absolutely. I love that expression. But I think when I was listening to that story, I thought, the moral of the story is going to be, yeah, we're a rappelling club. We're a rock climbing club, and this is perfect for, for our practice. But yeah, I mean, I love the idea of just you know, there are ways to remedy. I mean, I'm just listening to a lot of your stories. It's just how creative you are at remedying the situation when it's not just completely smooth sailing. And I think that's what a great lesson for, regardless of what industry you're in as an entrepreneur, of just how do you come up with a creative solution to the obstacles that you're going to face. And I really want you to kind of as we transition into kind of the teaching phase here, where I really just get out of the way and let you, as the professor, do your master class on what would it look like to do a startup again if you started tomorrow, and what type of industry would you step into. So and I think that the lessons that you've talked about are so apropos to this whole space. But you have the mic, and I'm just out of the way, and just give our listeners a kind of a quick class here at the end.
Okay, so if I were going to start all over again, the biggest mistake I made was not getting a mentor. And that would have saved so much pain and suffering for sure. That I would definitely do again. Um, and then as far as like action advice, like I'm doing a startup. I want something to motivate me to solve like innumerable problems. I'd read the book The Martian. I don't know if you've ever read that book, Kevin. Have you read it?
I have seen the movie, so yeah,
Okay, the
I don't.
movie's great. It doesn't do the book justice. The book is crazy. And so, but it really motivates you. Like if this guy can do this, but the author, even though it's fiction, like it does read a lot like nonfiction. Like, and even astronauts will tell you they deal with this when they're up in space. But like as an entrepreneur, you deal with these problems. Now they're not, you're not going to die if you don't solve them, but your company might. So
Exactly.
it's just a really great way to get in this motivational headspace of solving problems creatively, knowing that for every problem there really is a solution, and have this level 2 thinking to keep going and keep doing that and have that sort of internal grit for sure. um, the other thing I think is have some savings, have a plan. uh, most businesses, and this is my investment banker hat talking, but most startups are not going to be profitable the first year. You need to have something to live on. Now if you're super young, like I had, I was married and I was supporting like a family when I first quit my job. But if I were, say, starting in my 20s, I wouldn't need savings. Like live on ramen, you'll be just fine. But if you do have a dependent and a family, then yeah, have some savings, be responsible, and actually start maybe as a side hustle
Hmm.
before you go all in on that. I would also say the most important asset of the business is you. So take care of yourself. I meditate every morning to get me into this sort of tranquil headspace and to be present with those problems and be present with my clients and be present with the work and not have like this little monkey mind running my life. But if you don't practice doing it, it can run your life without even knowing it. So I recommend the Waking Up app by Sam Harris or Headspace app
Hmm.
as well. So the other side of that equation is after you meditate, work out. It's so good for your stress level because any startup is going to be stressful. And again, you need to have that. You need to be mentally strong. You need to be physically strong and get a good night's sleep every night as well. So those are going to be my action advice for starting up.
I love those points, and we've done this kind of segment, a number of different times, and had, a lot of the points kind of cross over from time to time, but we've certainly never had anybody recommend that you read the book The Martian. That is a first, it may be a long time before you have that repeated, but I love the idea of just the whole. I mean, every space mission that you've ever watched the movie, they're overcoming these insurmountable obstacles. If we're 1 degree off on our orbit, we're going to go burning into space, out of, and never, and miss our launch or our reentry window, or whatever those things are that they're aiming for. So I really appreciate you kind of drilling down. But I'm just curious, if you started tomorrow, would you start back in the same space that you're in, or would you maybe do something differently?
I think about this all the time. And I got 3 podcasts. I have the Land Geek podcast, I have the Best Passive Income Model podcast, and the current one is the Art of Passive Income podcast. But the Best Passive Income Model podcast, I would have, experts like you come on, I'd walk them to the model and say, do I have the best passive income model? And guys like Grant Cardone would kind of argue with me a little bit. And then like, yeah, you do. And so I still think about that every day. If everything's going to change, what's not going to change? And I think 2 things are not going to change. I think number one, people are always going to want a real asset. Raw land, it's going to outlive all of us. It is a generational asset. Number two, I think people are always going to want a good deal. So if you can buy it right, I think it'll always sell no matter what happens in the world when everything changes. So that being said, I've got a model, no physical inventory. It's a one-time sale. If we get passive income, there's built-in pain from the, if they don't keep paying, there's built-in pain. And it's an inefficient business with low competition. It's a niche that's unloved. So I'm flexible like a yogi. Kevin, if you can tell me a better model with margins of 300 to 1,000%, that's 90% automated with software and inexpensive VAs that you can literally do from anywhere in the world with an inexpensive laptop and a virtual mailbox, I'm open to it. I just have not heard of it or seen it or found it. And it's not for lack of looking.
Okay, what I would say that there's almost a third reason. You mentioned about just the land being a real asset, not going away, but the third thing is, I think people inherently want to own real property. I think there's something
Yeah.
intrinsic in like our own personal value that when we own something, I don't care what it is, it's, if you own it, you have a higher sense of worth or something, inherently.
No, absolutely. I joke, I call it man jewelry. Like my wife puts on her earrings. I'm like, she can't even see her earrings, but she likes the way it makes her feel. And I think that's the way I think men generally like the way it makes them feel, knowing that they've got this asset, it's raw land, they can camp there, they can improve it. There's something very uh, primordial about owning raw land that's your own, and then you can brag to your neighbors and your banker. Look at my balance sheet now. I own this asset. It's affordable. It's a good ego trip to say, you beat up this land investor because it was so cheap. Um, yeah, I agree. There is a lust for land in this country that a lot of people don't realize.
And if you set it up right, I mean, you can, when you go visit your land, it's then tax deductible through your corporation. So,
Oh
as you're
yeah.
viewing your asset or whatever it is. So normally we kind of wrap up just right after the kind of the rising tide startup school that you just kind of gave us. But I told you I would, before we started, that I reserved the right to chase a rabbit or two, and you kind of sparked two other questions that I wanted to kind of follow up on. Number one is, how do you combat the I would think that this is almost a how do I want to phrase that, it's almost a contagion, in your own spirit to buy and sell land, so you're, if it's like, the old adage that says, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I mean, how do you fight not wanting to scour, want ads or the classifieds, and scour realtor.com and the internet and Craigslist for deals all the time?
So I'm a deal junkie. I'll give you that. But that being said, I really, really value my time. And I know that as the CEO, my time is really best spent on strategy. And so that's really what I want to do. I get paid to think. And if I'm scouring all day long, I know I'm losing money. And if I'm losing money, I'm not doing what I want to do as a provider for my family. So that's what kind of keeps me grounded, is just having this purpose that's bigger than myself.
Mm,
I mean, there's a lot of things I like to do in life, but if it's just for me, they'll get old, and I want to have that purpose that's bigger than me.
right. I mean, I love the kind of the whole idea that it's almost like the premise of the book, the myth. Are you working on your business instead of in it? Have you just, in essence, have you just created another job for yourself, that you have 1,000 bosses now instead of one? And the whole idea of working on it and leading the business instead of, and delegating well and putting people in positions to do things that they can, that you could as well, but you shouldn't, type things. So I
Yeah,
love that idea.
absolutely.
So the last thing I wanted to ask you about was, you kind of touched on this and on the edges, but and really even in the steps that you talked about as far as the startup was concerned, but or the startup school segment. But so when you first started, so take us back to 2001 really quickly, and just the whole idea of uh, what was the learning curve? I mean, this is a pretty. I mean, there's so many things that you need to know to really protect yourself in this space. How did you was it the school of hard knocks that you went through? Was it, what was that learning process? Were you just watching YouTube videos ad nauseum? Were you reading books about real estate? I mean, what was the school school in air quotes that you went to learn this stuff?
Yeah, unfortunately, it was a school of hard knocks. I made literally $1 million mistakes, and that's why I'm so sort of, I guess, regretful of not seeking out a mentor sooner. But that was really it. I mean, there wasn't at that time anyone that I knew of that was doing what I was doing. Like there are people that were doing it, but we were all kind of doing it at the same time. There wasn't like this old school Yoda type figure
Mm-hmm.
that was going to generously kind of guide me and help me. Now, at my 5th year in, I got a business mentor, and he kind of looked at me. He's like, "Mark, you got a great job for yourself, but this is not a business." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, who's doing all the work?" I'm like, "I love it." I'm like, he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "You think like your old job, you created a better job for yourself, but don't fool yourself. This is no business." And so then I started creating systems and processes, automation, and that took about 5 years
Mm,
to figure out.
yeah.
So it's, I've been doing this now full time since 2001. It's been quite the roller coaster ride of hard knocks. But thankfully, I had a great mentor. His mentor is a billionaire. He sold his company for 360 million. So I got really lucky.
So, would you say moving forward, you're spending more of your time actually acquiring land and doing land transactions, or are you spending as much time teaching people how to do this?
Well, I spend about 2 hours a week in Frontier Properties, which is the land investing business.
Uh huh.
And I'm working with a team on those days. So this is how I theme my week
Right.
basically. So Monday is terminal day. Pretend this could be my last day on earth. I don't know if it's going to be or not. What would I want to do with that day? So usually it's very simple things. I want to have breakfast with my wife. I want to have a nice cup of coffee with her. I want to go on a hike or a bike or a walk, whatever it's going to be, like spend quality time with my loved ones, take the kids to school, pick them up from school, hang out with them. Maybe we'll play a game. Maybe I'll cook a meal, whatever it is. But at the end of that day, read a great book. But at the end of the day, I want to feel like I could die. It was a great day. So Mondays and Fridays are those terminal days. And then Tuesday is my podcast day. So I just talk to mentors like you all day long, and I get smarter on Tuesday, which is great. And I love it. If I'm not podcasting, then again, I'm thinking and I'm doing strategy and I'm reading and I'm trying to do, growth and self improvement. Wednesday are my team meetings day. So I meet with the entire team in Frontier, Land Geek, and Geek Pay, and just see how are things going well. Are there any questions? Any concerns? God forbid I've had a really strong cup of coffee that day because I might have an idea and I'm going to break something and I've just created more work for you. So you know, that's on
My
Wednesday.
team dreads Wednesdays. That's right.
My team does not love Wednesdays. Hey, can we do this? So Thursdays are client days where I do check-ins with my clients and spend time with them or looking at again other ways to improve the client experience in Frontier and Land Geek with things that I call like glue gifts, giving a little unexpected extra. So what would it be like for a client to get a call from me, just checking like a check-in, like unexpectedly? They, that kind of stuff is kind of cool. To get a VIP land buyer, I might just call and say, hey, I've got this amazing deal. Don't tell anybody. Let's do it and negotiate for a little bit just to have fun. And then Friday again, terminal day, and Saturday and Sunday are just days with the kids and the family. And 3 teenagers, it's tough, but hopefully I can connect with them at some point.
I mean, I love the way that you've kind of framed your week and really set aside, specific tasks for specific days. And there are always fires that come up that kind of cause you to adjust the schedules from time to time. But it sounds like to me that you're very proactive in how you approach your week, and I mean, your team can count on that as well, and the people that you work with can certainly count on that. And you've kind of established the boundaries in your life. That's really good.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, the main value is quality of relationships, because if you look at people on their deathbed, that's what they really value is the
Number
quality of
one.
the
Yeah.
relationships, number one. So money, fine, stuff, fine, whatever. I think that's really ego related. I think when you start to peel the onion, what we really want are those people in our lives that we can be our real selves with, be vulnerable with. And unfortunately, it just doesn't happen unless you take the time and do that. But
Right.
how do you get that time? I think that for me, Frontier Properties is that vehicle so that I can work when I want, where I want, with whom I want. That's what the passive income buys me, is better relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love the model, and it's interesting because I'm going to spend some time this week and kind of look back and look back through your website. So as we wrap up today, tell us where's the best place for people to find you online, and if they're interested in this, what's the best next step, next step that they need to take, next action step. What would you encourage them to do?
Yeah, we have a $97 course called the Passive Income Launch Kit. Kevin, with your permission, I'd love to offer it to your listeners for free. If they
Wow.
just go to thelandgeek.com/launch kit and see if this model resonates with them or not.
Well, I appreciate it. Launch kit is all one word or two? Is there a
Yeah, it's
space?
all. No space, just one
Okay.
word.
All right. So the landgeek.com/launch kit. So I
Yeah.
encourage our listeners to take Mark up on that offer and take a look at the course that he's so generously provided for us. And I really am grateful for you doing that for our listeners. And you're going to probably see my email address pop in that one as well. So I want to take a look at that myself. But
Yeah, no,
Mark,
absolutely.
it's been a pleasure to have you with us today. It's just really been good to kind of just banter back and forth and have an enjoyable Friday afternoon and just listen to your story and just the value you provided to our listeners and just the I mean just the rhythm and the like the roller coaster that you described as the process that you've gone through and I frankly just appreciate the humility that you've shown even in the process and said, hey, if I could have broken it, I've broken it sometime along the path and learned so many hard lessons. But it sounds like to me that it was really that diligence and that hard work has really paid off, and you created the lifestyle that you can really, walk in and be proud of, and be a real benefit not only to you and your family but generations to come. So, Mark,
Thank
thanks
you.
again for just sharing with us today and just helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin.